Okay, can everybody hear me virtually that's attending virtually? Not thumbs up. All right, thanks. Thanks, Silas. It's 11:30 according to the computer, so we are going to start now. We've got a really a full agenda. I'm excited again to have so many of you here in attendance as well. We have more chairs around the room. We need to pull some in for seats and agendas. Did everybody get an agenda? Okay, this for the next 10 minutes, we have a little bit of time for welcome and introductions. So we are going to go around the room first, and if we get around the room well enough, you have any announcements you want to make, or if you're a presenter, you don't need to go into a full explanation of who you are, but if you're new here or anything you'd like to share about yourself or your organization, please do. And then if we have time, we will go to our virtual attendees as well, because I know we have a lot that are not able to be here in person. So it's good to be almost post-COVID to be here. So I'm Rebecca Dilge. I am the director of the Utah Broadband Center, and to my left is my favorite boss, Ryan Starks. He's our managing director of business services. I'm glad to have him here today and for his support. And we'll start right here with introductions.
I'm James Dixon. I'm with the associate director of the Center for Rural Development here in Utah.
I'm Todd Jensen. I work at the Attorney General's office, and I'm assigned to work with Broadband Center in the governor's office here.
So I have an attorney.
So Bruce Lancaster, CEO Wilson Electronics. I'll tell you more about that. I'm doing a presentation later.
And Tom Lerner, and I work for Bruce at Wilson, and I manage relationships with carriers and help to get their residential and business customers better access to their networks.
Eric Hutchings, Salt Lake County.
Lynn Beecher, Go Fiber. I do all of Southern Utah, been here since day one with this committee.
Roger Timmerman, CEO at Utopia Fiber.
Jesse Harris, I'm a cybersecurity analyst and longtime broadband advocate.
Alan Lee, I work for the Utah State Library.
Liz Gavinis, also with the State Library, and working with Rebecca on our state digital equity plan.
Kelly Cole with UETN.
Brian Bowers of 5G Alliance Utah. Jeff Egley with UETN.
Andy Buckmeyer, University of Utah, research corporate ambassador, but I'm moving on from that role soon, and also founder of a company called SignalStep that is working with Freedom Pie and Helium and some other folks who are crowdsourced with 5G broadband.
Right.
Josh Chandler with Utopia Fiber.
Sylvia Wilkins with Strata Networks. Layla Reynolds, I work with Rebecca, so you'll get a lot of emails from me.
Katie Williams, I'm with Clorox Engineers, and we've been helping with the speed test campaign.
Kara.
Tara Tui with AT&T.
And,
oh, sorry, and Lynn, maybe I've got you beat from day one.
That's right.
I'm Greg Gill with Digital Polarized.
Paul Murdoch, High Country Net in Harriman.
Steve Anderson with Fusion Networks.
Ken Valentine with Utah Broadband.
Adam Mills with Civis Analytics.
Todd Adams with Vicor Teleconstruction.
Chris Wilson, Utah State Senate. I represent District 25, which is most of Cache and Rich County, and I'm the new guy. So
Glad to have you. Jack.
Jack Walkenhurst with OS Communications.
Glad to have you here too. How are we doing time-wise? We did that in a record 4 minutes. So just so you know, this room is bugged. Microphones where you can see the green are around the room. And I know I always forget to tell you this until after the meeting. So sometimes you can be heard wherever you are sitting. So just know that Zoom might be picking things up. They can pick up your wrappers too. So if you think of it, you're done with your wrappers, like push them away to the side. Otherwise it makes it a little bit difficult for those that are listening virtually. We had someone just walk in and now you're on the spot. We've just made introductions. Would you?
I'm Daniel Parrish with Direct Communications.
Great, Daniel. Thanks. Oh, great. Let's see. I'm going to call on the virtual people. Let's see, Lucas.
Hey everyone, I'm Lucas. I work for the city of South Salt Lake. I work at a community center that's under construction right now called the Community Opportunity Center.
Douglas Meredith.
Yes, my name is Douglas Meredith. I work for John Sterilakis and work with Kira Slauson at URTA.
Kira Slauson, representing URTA, the Utah Rural Telecom Association.
Rick Gateford.
Rick Gaisford, Education Technology Specialist, Utah State Board of Education.
Rachel.
Hi, everyone. Rachel Linehan. I'm with the Utah State Library.
Cameron Francis.
Hi, good morning. This is Cameron Francis. I'm the CEO of Beehive Broadband.
DJ.
DJ Good with Alero Telecom.
Jacob Brace.
Jacob Brace with Google Fiber.
See, Eric in the car.
Yeah, Eric Isom participating on behalf of Lumen.
Okay, Jerome Browning.
I'm Jerome Browning. I'm the State E-rate Coordinator, Emergency Connectivity Funding Coordinator, and through the UETN.
Okay, Brian Carver.
Good morning. I'm Brian Carver with Bear River Association of Governments.
Lynn Yoakum.
Lynn Yoakum with Utah Department of Transportation, Fiber Optics.
Nick Paxton.
Nick Paxton with Rocky Mountain West Telecom.
Glenn Fishbein, you're going to be presenting. I'm just going to save you. Those of you that are presenting, I'm not going to announce you right now. Nancy, oh, you're with Geo Partners too. Let's see. Tech Lab, Tech Wave. Rod Moore.
Rod Moore with Emory Telecom.
Valina, oh, she's presenting. We're gonna wait on you, Valina. Let's see, who am I missing? Christopher Curley.
Good morning. My name is Christopher Curley, and I'm actually going to be with Valina. I am with the NTUA Choice Wireless Company.
Great. Carrie Albee.
I'm Kerry Alvey. I'm the CEO of South Central Communications, COO.
Charles Baldwin.
Charles Baldwin here with Bitstream Communications and Bitstream Smart Solutions. Thank you.
Karen Peterson.
Hi, I'm Karen Peterson. I represent House District 13 in the legislature, which is Northern Davis County. Thanks.
Thanks for joining us. Genola. Okay, Gail Long.
Yes, Gail Long, TDS Broadband Service.
Great, glad to have you. Danny Harris.
Hi, my name is Danny Harris. I'm the Advocacy Director for AERP Utah.
Brian Yazzie.
Yes, I'm Brian Yazzie, and I chair the State COVID-19 Multicultural Digital Equity Committee.
Great. Kay Olson.
Katie Olson with Union Telephone.
Great. There was one in it, Kyle Bradshaw. All right, and I know I missed a couple of people because it seems like it pops whenever somebody else maybe gets on. So if I missed someone, speak up. Hey, well, that's okay, because we probably used up our time now for our introductions, and we have a good group and a lot of important stakeholders are all of you, especially as we're approaching now all these federal dollars and the opportunity to expand our broadband across the state. So everybody is so important to this cause. Layla, I think Randy Crosby might be trying to get on. I don't know if you can take a minute and check your emails. So our first speaker, I am so excited. Lisa, I want you to say hello so that we can get you on the screen so we can all see you here.
Hello, everybody.
Yay, there we go. Lisa, I've had the opportunity to be introduced to her and be with her in person in Washington, D.C. I think she's shy. She is the senior advisor for the White House for broadband at the National Economic Council. And she's here to give us an overview of the federal broadband programs. And I know she's going to say time for questions. So don't worry, those questions will be addressed after her presentation. Or if you don't mind during, Lisa, you decide where we have both a hybrid, it kind of gets a little tricky, but I know Layla will be here and she can be watching in the chat and I can try to watch the chat as well. And so we'll let you know what those questions may be that show up in the chat and we'll turn the time over to you. Thanks for coming.
Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for having me. I love the fact you did introductions of everybody first so I could get a good sense of who all is here. And I am so thrilled that so many people from different parts of Utah, both geographically and in terms of the work you do, are all focused on getting better broadband to Utah. It's great. I'd be remiss if I didn't start out with a shout out to my old friend Jerome, the state E-rate coordinator, who I hope you all know does a terrific job for the state as state E-rate coordinator. I see Jerome waving, I'll wave back. And I suspect that you all are doing a great job in your areas too. I have to say, this is a wonderful job I have because we're at a point where everybody in the country is rowing in the same direction when it comes to broadband. I'm not going to sing to the choir. You all know this, but the pandemic underscored how important it is that we have high-speed broadband to all Americans. And hopefully I won't actually say anything today that you all don't already know. But I think it's probably useful to hear it straight from the White House so you can really understand where this administration is coming from. The bottom line is that the Biden-Harris administration fully supports making sure that all Americans have access to reliable, affordable, high-speed broadband. And we think about this in three components. And I suspect most of you think about it in similar buckets, maybe using slightly different words, but access, affordability, and equity. And so I'm going to talk about each of those three buckets and what federal funding looks like for them and why. And I should say, I'm going to focus today on residential broadband, not because I don't think mobile broadband is important. It is. I mean, I've got 2 or 3 cell phones myself. But because, again, the pandemic really brought home how important it is for Americans to have high-speed residential broadband. And we think that fiber is the gold standard. And so everywhere we can get fiber, we think that's what federal funds should be spent on. So let me talk about first about access, also deployment. Not surprisingly, and again, something that you all know, rural and tribal areas are more likely than urban areas to lack access to basic high-speed infrastructure. To fiber or cable is really what I'm talking about. But there are people in urban and suburban areas without access, and some people in rural and tribal areas with super fast access. The Federal Communications Commission is building a better broadband map as we speak, which will allow us to identify on a location by location basis where there is a lack of access. But again, I think you all know this because you've been looking at it for Utah. What we'll likely see is a sort of Swiss cheese map with different size holes being locations without broadband access. So how are we going to solve that problem? Well, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Bill provides $65 billion for broadband. The largest part of what that is $42.45 billion for what we call the BEAD program, which stands for Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program at the Department of Commerce, administered by NTIA, which is part of the Department of Commerce. The BEAD program will provide a minimum of $100 million to every state, and the rest will be divided based primarily on the relative number of locations without access to broadband infrastructure. The focus of the BEAD program is on deployment to unserved locations, but it can be used for other purposes. It's important to know, though, and I think you do, that states and localities don't need to wait for that funding. They can and are using American Rescue Plan funding for broadband deployment. In particular, the Treasury Department is distributing state and local fiscal recovery funds, and funding from that program can be used for broadband. And also, the Treasury Department is distributing funding from the Capital Projects Program, and every state has a minimum allocation of $100 million for capital projects, where broadband is one of the 3 preferred uses. So I know that folks in Utah are thinking about how to use that capital project funding, as well as the state and local fiscal recovery funds. There are, and I think this is public, 5 states that have already filed plans with the Department of Treasury to use all or a large part of their capital projects funds for broadband deployment. And the sooner those applications get into Treasury, the sooner that they can be approved and that money can be spent on deployment. So I hope Utah is looking hard at how it's going to use its capital projects fund, and that broadband is high on your priority list. In addition, Department of Agriculture has a $1.15 billion grant application window that it just closed for broadband in rural areas. And the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law provided another $2 billion specifically for rural broadband deployment. Plus, the Commerce Department is rolling out $1 billion worth of grants to tribal lands from the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2021, and the Bipartisan Infrastructure Bill provided another $2 billion. And it's not just funding. The FCC is required to conduct a rulemaking and adopt an order to prevent digital discrimination in deployment. So if that is an issue that's of interest to you, I encourage you to engage in that rulemaking. And when it comes to state use of broadband funds, I encourage everybody to participate and to work with your broadband office to talk about what your community's needs are. That will be an expected part of the BEAD program, and it's just a good practice. On affordability, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law includes $14.2 billion for the Affordable Connectivity Program. That's the successor to the Emergency Broadband Benefits Program. There are already more than 11 million households subscribed to through the Affordable Connectivity Program. It's basically a subsidy that can be used with an ISP by eligible households. And eligible households include any household with income less than 200% of the federal poverty guidelines, at or below 200% of the federal poverty line guidelines, or where there's a member in the household who already receives benefits from a number of other federal programs, including Medicaid, WIC, SNAP, has a member who's eligible for free and reduced school lunch. And I would really encourage each and every one of you to take a look at acpbenefit.org, which is the site for the Affordable Connectivity Program, and think about what you can do to encourage folks in your communities who may not be aware of the program, how you can help make them aware of the program and help them take advantage of it, because it's a great option for people who do have infrastructure but can't afford access to the internet. In addition, almost all the programs I mentioned either require or encourage ISPs to adopt at least one low-cost option. And so to the extent you're participating as members of the community, or in some cases ISPs, it's a great opportunity to make sure that we have full reach of the internet to everybody, not just to folks who can afford it. Then on the equity piece, so I mentioned that the the BEAD program provides some funding for equity, but the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law includes a historic $2.75 billion in funding for equity. It's divided into 3 tranches. First, states will have to develop state equity plans. And based on what I heard just in the introductions, it sounds like Utah has already got a state equity plan underway, which is great. Second, there'll be funding for states to implement those plans. And then there'll also be a competitive grant program, again, run by NTIA for equity projects. So please look out for all of that. In addition, in addition, as I mentioned, there are various rulemakings at the FCC. There's a rulemaking on digital redlining, which I mentioned. There's also one on broadband labeling. So in the next 6 months or so, look for an order from the FCC requiring ISPs to adopt what we think of as the equivalent of nutrition labels for broadband. You know, the labels on the back of cans and bottles that tell you about the nutritional content of what you're eating or drinking. The idea is the same for broadband, so that consumers can compare and contrast different offerings from ISPs. So those are the 3 buckets of sort of what we think it will take to get broadband to all Americans and make sure everybody has the tools that they need to use broadband. I can't see a chat. I should have said that right from the beginning. The way the White House works is we can't see chat in Zoom so that they don't become official records. So I will need folks to either raise their hand and ask questions or have Layla let me know what the questions are. I know that's a lot, but I hope you got a general sense of what we're doing to make sure all Americans have access to affordable, reliable, high-speed broadband.
Actually, we don't have any questions in the chat.
Yeah, I don't know how to use chat, Rebecca, on Zoom. If I can speak, can you hear me?
Yes.
Lisa, thank you for that overview. I wanted to ask just one question on the low income program, the ACP that you described for us. And then there was another term that you used with the BEAD program, which is a low cost programs, low cost offerings. Is low cost and low income synonymous for you, or is that different? Is the low cost offering required in BEAD going to be independent of income qualification, or is it just another income qualification program?
That's a really good question. So I can tell you what the statute says. So the Affordable Connectivity Program, as I mentioned, is a program for lower income Americans, right? With a threshold, if you want to qualify through income at 200% of the federal poverty level, which is about $55,000 a year for a family of 4, just to give you a sense of where that threshold is. Obviously lower for smaller families, larger for bigger families. Or people can qualify by virtue of receiving other federal benefits. The statute does not specify what the statute says is that every provider, every subgrantee, so every ISP that takes money through the BEAD program, which is really through the state, because states control the pot of money and decide how to spend that money within the strictures of the program. What the statute says is every essentially ISP that participates, that receives money, will have to offer at least one low-cost option to eligible subscribers. And the administrator of the program at NTIA has the authority to define eligible subscribers, the universe of subscribers, and the state will work, each state, so in your case, Utah, will work with the administrator on what those low-cost options should be, which should be informed by local community input and by input from the subgrantees, from potential subgrantees. So that's a long way around to saying the NTIA has not yet issued guidance on what that might be, and it will be a conversation with the relevant states.
So in your view from the White House, you could see it differ, meaning low cost is something and low income is another thing in that framework.
Well, look, I think every ISP should participate in the Affordable Connectivity Program, and most of them are, right? So there are more than 1,000 ISPs participating in the Affordable Connectivity Program, that's not, that's a way to get funding from the government for a $30 subsidy. The question then is, what more, I think, does a provider do, right?
The question is, if I'm an ACP provider, do I get to check the box that I have a low cost program offering in BEAD?
Well, I mean, so if you're play that out, right? So NTI hasn't offered any guidance, so I can't tell you the answer to that. But if you were an ISP and serving Salt Lake City, and the lowest cost option you offered was a $200 a month plan, I mean, question as to whether you would last in Salt Lake City very long, right? Because you'd have competition. But the fact that you accept a $30 subsidy off your cheapest plan in my outrageous scenario, that doesn't sound like a low cost option to me. Is it to you?
Yeah, I hear exactly what you're saying. Yeah, I'm looking forward to what NTIA is going to say on that.
So you will need guidance from NTIA, and then the states will have to work with NTIA as well.
Yeah, thank you.
Are there any questions here in the room? Hey, Tara Tui. Hi, Lisa. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you. I can't see you. Oh, that's because you're in the room, right?
No, I'm behind. So first of all, I just wanted to say, I recognize you from when I ran the state office and all of your work on E-rate. And so thank you for everything you've done in the past. And it's exciting to see you in this position now. But I wanted to ask about wireless. So I work for AT&T now. This isn't a product that we have, but it's something that I've been diving into, right? A lot of people now are using wireless connections for their home broadband connection. Maybe not necessarily a mobile wireless connection, maybe a fixed wireless connection that would be able to meet the minimum speed requirements in some of the federal funding. So what are your thoughts on wireless products being included in some of these programs?
So look, we think the gold standard is fiber. And I don't actually think there's any disagreement about that.
I totally agree. And I'm saying in some cases, it might not make total sense.
Yeah. So I just mean, so to start with, we think fiber is the gold standard. We think for the most part, the government should be, if it's the government's going to spend money, it should be spending money on fiber. There are exceptions to that, right? Particularly where it is economically not feasible, topographically impossible. And the standard's not impossibility in fairness, right? Again, it's easy to pick the far end of the spectrum. But if you look at the guidance the Treasury has put out with respect to its broadband funding, or the guidance that USDA has put out with respect to its funding for rural broadband, it starts with the expectation of fiber where fiber is possible, but recognize there are some places where it's not economically feasible. The thing about wireless, fixed wireless, is it's heavily dependent on fiber, right? It's not like the data just stays in the air forever, or if it does, the air is up there in the fiber, between the poles. So the deeper you drive fiber into the networks, the better it is for both mobile and fixed wireless. But we really think you start with the assumption that everybody should get fiber who can possibly get it, because it has a long life. It can be upgraded through electronics. Speeds are getting faster and faster. Private deployment of other options is great and fine and terrific and supplements and adds value. And in some cases will be the only reasonable option, but not in most cases. Again, if you look at the USDA program, which has been funding broadband for many years, what's striking is that over time, a higher and higher and higher percentage of the projects that come to USDA for funding in rural areas are fiber projects. And that includes in the state of Alaska. So.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Lisa, we have a couple of questions. Pull it up.
There's one in the back of the room
too. Okay, so is Is promoting rural competition a priority for this administration? And what is your opinion of open access and rural network funding?
So competition is good. It helps drive down prices. This administration is pro-competition. Sorry, what was the second bit?
What is your opinion of open access and rural network funding as opposed to mandatory unbundled network elements?
As opposed to?
Mandatory unbundled network elements.
Oh, mandatory unbundled network elements. Okay, to unpack that would take just about an hour. I'm going to say, as a policy matter, we're generally in favor of open access, and stick with that. Yeah, I'm going to stick with that.
You have a question?
Yeah, I've got a question back. I don't recognize you at all, unlike the people who before me, but I got a question about the broadband nutrition labels. Can you expound on that? What you think that's going to look like? What our requirements on that are going to be? Just some more feedback on that if you can.
Sure. And probably, I wish I had a link for you. You might want to just Google it and look for FCC broadband nutrition labels. The Federal Communications Commission has some examples available on their website, but I can't tell you exactly where. The idea is to provide information about price and speed and additional fees in ways that allow for cost comparison. The FCC had been working towards something like this, and that work stopped when the FCC's net neutrality, when it was rolled back. Net neutrality work was rolled back during the last administration. Not that you know, because we don't know each other, as you pointed out, although now we do, but I'm not good with visuospatial. Nobody would ever hire me to design anything aesthetic. So I'm really curious to see what they look like. I mean, I've seen the examples and they look to me a lot like nutrition labels, trying to provide the most relevant information in the clearest text possible. You've seen there are equivalents now and it's been a while, I'm dating myself, in the credit card world. You now with credit card statements get sort of nutrition labels about what happens, what your interest rate is, what that means. I think there are various examples across different parts of our economy where you've seen a move towards this kind of nutrition label. But the main goal is to be able for consumers to be able to compare the most significant information before purchasing or when considering switching.
You said Google FCC broadband nutrition labels, and we might be able to see some examples out there. That's what you said.
I hope so. I mean, I haven't Googled that, but I expect you should see some.
It comes up under mobile or fixed broadband labels. So just leave the nutrition part out.
Oh, there you go. That makes sense.
Labels, yeah, even better. The nutrition
Thanks.
part.
Sorry, I didn't hear that bit.
It was a pointless joke.
Oh.
I'm throwing the address in the chat right now.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, of course, it's not the link. It's just the address, because I didn't look it up, but it was just shown to me. So I have a question, unless somebody else in the room has one. So with the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, or IJA, or that has a B program, and it also has middle mile. You see, I know they haven't produced, the NOFO and the rules and everything yet, but do you see that including middle mile, will we just be required to apply for the competitive middle mile grant? Or do you think we will be able to use that like for a state grant program and other things like the BIL? We can use it for a grant program, but not exclusively that. Will we be able to use it in other ways, however the state deems necessary?
Okay, I'm going to split that into 3 questions. One, As you point out, and I did not mention, in addition to the BEAD program, NTIA is responsible for administering a middle mile grant program. They will do a notice of funding opportunity for that middle mile grant program. Both the middle mile, the BEAD, and the state equity plan grant program notices of funding opportunity will be released middle of May to early June. I think the state equity plan one, at least statutorily, could come a few weeks after the middle mile and BEAD program. They will be separate programs. The middle mile program is a competitive grant program administered by NTIA. So that money does not flow through states. It is simply a grant program that the NTIA will administer. Sort of like the state and local infrastructure program that they announced grants for in the last couple of months. The second question I heard was, how much flexibility will states have to use the BEAD funding? There are a bunch of eligible uses for the BEAD funding, but you'll really have to wait to see the NTIA NOFO to see how NTIA and the Department of Commerce have interpreted the statutory language to see how they, what kind of flexibility they're going to give to states and territories. But that funding is allocated to states, and states will be the ones who are required to run competitive grant programs. And the statute is specific that the state has to run competitions. It doesn't say what kind of competitions, right? So it doesn't say if you could do an auction or a regular RFA or what request for, request or an RFI, not I, but you know what I mean. But the NTIA will have a point person for every state at NTIA to work with the folks in the state broadband office or however the state decides to set it up. But whoever in the state is responsible for that funding will work closely with the NTIA on crafting the state's plans for deployment and other uses. But that money the state will be responsible for distributing that money pursuant to competitive grant.
Okay, thank you. That helps a lot. That answers my question. If anybody has any more questions, I know Lisa's really great about responding to emails. If you're, or if you want to email me and I can forward them to Lisa. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us today.
Of course. And what I said up top, I really mean. I think it's so wonderful. There's so many people in the state focused on making sure that everybody in Utah has access to broadband and equitable access to broadband. And I really applaud you all for spending your time doing this important work. So thank you very much. The work I do won't mean anything if you all aren't out there in the States doing what you're doing. So thank you very, very, very much.
Great. And I'll amen that.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, now we will be hearing from Bruce Lancaster with Wilson Electronics. Speaking about expanding cellular reach. And I guess you've got somebody.
Tom's going to drive the slides, so we'll get back there. And thank you, Rebecca, for inviting Wilson to be a part of this. And we're really excited about it. So I only have 10 minutes, so it's not going to be death by PowerPoint. We're going to go really, really fast. And I may not be as interesting as Lisa because I don't have hundreds of millions of dollars to dole out to improve broadband, but we think we have a great solution, and we'll just go through that. So bear with me. So I would just want to introduce Wilson because probably a lot of people don't know what we are. So we are a Utah manufacturer of cellular repeaters and or boosters. We use that term interchangeably. Boosters are kind of the consumer version. We manufacture all of our products in St. George, Utah. We've been here for 20 years. And Tara probably knows us or knows of us with AT&T because we enhance cellular connectivity and coverage. So this is a picture of our plant down in St. George. We have Design Center in Texas. But the bulk of our people are here, about 350 people, more or less. We scale up and down a little bit based on seasonality. So we really created this category. Jim Wilson, who founded the company many years ago, really was the IP leader. He created the technology to amplify and extend that reach of cellular connectivity. And generally we say it's not a bad network, just for all disclosure, it's either a bad building, a mountain in the way, or just too far of a reach. So we can, enhance that. So we've been one of Utah's best companies to work for the last 4 or 5 years. So we're really proud of that fact. And we're part of the Utah 5G Alliance. So thank you, Brian, for bringing us into this. All right, so we sold millions of products, hundreds of patents of this. This is our product range. So I'm going really fast. If you have any questions, please shout it out. I just don't want to get us behind schedule. So we make kitted solutions for vehicle and residential, and we operate under the WeBoost brand for that. So if you see us in Best Buy, you'll see a WeBoost brand. We're in REI, Best Buy, a lot of other major retailers, of course, online. And then we have a business solution, which we operate under WeBoost for business. That's really for SMBs. Think under 15,000 square feet. And we have a national install program, which I'll talk about in a second. And then we operate our commercial under Wilson Pro brand. And that's really targeted at the enterprise customers. And we can, so for all those who shop at Tiffany's, every single Tiffany store in the US has our solution in it. And that's why your phone works inside the store. Because a lot of metal, a lot of glass, a lot of difficult materials to get cellular connectivity through. So again, it's not a bad network. It's just some buildings stop us. So Whole Foods, 30% of all Whole Foods, Microsoft has deployed us in a lot of their campuses, many hospitals. So I can go on and on and on about the commercial applications. We've done millions of square feet of manufacturing. There's a Mercedes-Benz plant in Alabama, 2 million square feet, no connectivity inside the building, installed our solution. Now they have full 5G connectivity throughout our solution. That's the Wilson Pro. So how does it work? So it's really conceptually super simple. If my engineering team were up here, they would be like, it's more complicated than that, but super, super simple. There's an antenna on the outside of the building or vehicle, and that receives the signal from the tower, the macro network, pumps it in through an analog cable to an amplifier that sits somewhere inside the building. That amplifier enhances the signal, amplifies that out to an indoor antenna or multiple indoor antennas. In the residential and vehicle, usually it's one antenna. In the enterprise, it could be literally hundreds of antennas. So if we were to do a large retail, think of a big box store, you could have 50 antennas being driven off of our system, taking that signal and then propagating it out. And then of course the reverse works. So your phone or device inside the building would then be picked up by the inside antenna, amplified and sent back to the tower. So it's bidirectional amplification. So pretty straightforward. There's a lot of magic in there because we need and do remain invisible to the network. So in 2014, the FCC created guidelines. We actually helped write those. We worked with all of the major US carriers, actually international carriers as well, but we worked with all the major carriers to ensure that those technical specs and rules were put in place to ensure that the networks are not harmed by our products or any of our competitors' products for that matter. So I talked about the nationwide installation. I'm gonna be really cognizant of time, so I'm almost finished here. We offer through our Ontec partnership. So we have a great partnership with Dish, who has their installation arm, which is Ontec, nationwide installation, any zip code in the US within 24 hours of scheduling the appointment. So we actually include that installation in our highest end product, both for small and medium businesses as well as residential. And this has been a really great opportunity because many people can't envision themselves climbing up on the roof of their house, running a cable, penetrating the house, installing amplifier, installing an inside antenna. So now we include that service in our high-end products, and it's been tens of thousands of installs over the nation over the last year since we've done that, and it's been really, really well received. And we provide that connectivity so many people are looking for. And of course, they're all 5G compatible. So I don't want to get down into the 5G hole because I'm going to be here for hours with that. But they're 5G compatible. Simple story. All right, and the last side, this is just a look at the vehicle solutions. Again, I'm going really super fast. It's just an idea to introduce our products, our solution. And the question is, why are we talking about cellular? We're a whole bunch of fiber broadband guys, and Lisa just said it's all about broadband and fiber, and I'm with Tara on this. There are many situations where you cannot run fiber down that last mile or the last several miles, where we need that connectivity. So it's not necessarily about vehicle, although in vehicles it's obvious you can't put fiber in. So that is us in a nutshell. We believe we can help extend rural connectivity to those in need, because we're we have this incredible cellular network out there, multiple cellular networks that can extend that reach, can provide connectivity. Sometimes they just need a little bit of help, and that's what we do. So any questions or comments? I think I'm right on time.
Doing great. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I can speak fast, so I apologize. I can speak all day about this company. I've been here for 6 years and I love it. So comments, question? Yes, sir.
Are you guys, at one of these meetings previously, was educated about how some rural communities, smaller communities are using technology like this, where they'll maybe pop an antenna on top of a fire station or something like that and provide community access to some sort of Wi-Fi or whatever? Since then, I've been intrigued by what Murray School District has done to get access to students. Are you guys in that space as well? And not just bringing it into the building, but also maybe to the neighborhood or surrounding the building?
So typically we work with a lot of partners that actually provide that connectivity solution, but we're usually just providing the pipe or the airwaves, right, if you will. So as far as larger community deployments, sure. I mean, we could light up a fire station, and they in turn could put a big Wi-Fi system that could broadcast as far as they want, but we don't typically do the endpoints.
And yours is more cellular.
Yes, we're only just enhancing the cellular connectivity.
Murray's was a CRBS.
Yeah, correct. They were
CBRS, yeah.
CBRS.
Solution.
Yeah, but CBRS is just a frequency. So in the cellular bands, right? Yeah, you have everything, right, from 600 megahertz all the way up to 39 gigahertz, and we have solutions covering all of those. So we do not have a CBRS product announced on the market at this moment, but we do have C-band, we have high frequency millimeter wave solutions, and we have, of course, low band, which is sub 6 gigahertz. Brian?
Bruce, great to see you.
Yeah, you too.
So along those lines, I think just the extension of that question really is, do you foresee or envision, Wilson Electronics taking a fixed wireless implementation and boosting that out to get greater reach, wider reach out into a community?
Absolutely. We think that is a very real opportunity to extend the reach. Of course, you're going to be running fiber. You got to have fiber there, but at a point, you can't run fiber down every 3-mile country road. I mean, I think it's just going to be impractical, or what Lisa says, economically unfeasible. I mean, it's a debate, but yes, we absolutely see that as a real opportunity. In Utah, which is a very rural state, as well as other states where you can imagine are very, Alaska, Texas is actually a big opportunity. So I think we can learn from them for this state as well. Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to say, I mean, I think it's really cool to see a Utah company doing this, but I wondered if you could talk about like your presence nationally, because like you're not just like a small Utah company. Like,
no,
you're
we're
a
not.
really big deal, and I want everyone to know, that it's really cool that you're based here.
Yeah, so we are based here. We're very proud to manufacture here in Utah. We use as many sub-suppliers from Utah. Our packaging comes from Utah. I don't want to put plugs in for specific companies. All the SMT and circuit board assembly comes from a Utah company as well. So we're very, very proud of that. And we have a global supply chain, of course. Our solutions are national and international. So Canada is a very big market for us. Latin America, we're all the way down to Chile providing solutions. We would be larger globally, except there's regulatory, every country has their own regulatory rules and requirements for enhancing and repeating the cellular network. So as you can imagine, there's a lot of money around owning that spectrum, and the carriers in the various countries are there. So we're in Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia, India, Middle East, Australia. We're really a global company, nationally as well. Yes.
Well, and
Strongest in the US.
internationally, yeah.
Yes.
But I just think it's so cool that you guys are started here too, right?
Yes, thank you. Yes, sir.
Quick question, an odd one to start with. I'm informed there's a Title III company in St. George. Is that you guys? You know what
No,
Title III
I would assume it's not us because I don't know what that means.
The second-
And I figured as a CEO, I would know if that.
The second question is, what are you doing any work in cybersecurity?
Well, no. Our solutions are dependent on the network security, which is top rate. That's one of the stories we always say. Wi-Fi is a questionable from a security standpoint. We're all in the analog domain. So we do not decompose the cellular signals and then reconstruct them. We just take them in an analog domain, amplify and then rebroadcast. So we do not have any security vulnerability on our solution. All right, I think I'm getting the hook.
Now you know who to talk to. after the
Yes, I'd
meeting.
love to meet with you guys and help you out. Thank
This
you.
is great. No, thank you so much. We will hold the applause so we can just move right on to our next presentation. Appreciate you doing that in like 10 minutes because it took me an hour to get it all. I still didn't get it all. So, but I did this second time around. So thanks, Bruce. We have Mike Romano. Mike, say hi so we can see you.
Hi, everybody. Can you see and hear me or see my slides?
Yes, we can hear you and see your slides. Mike is with the National Rural Broadband Association, speaking to us about getting and keeping rural communities connected. We'll give it to you.
Great, thanks. Thanks for having me. So yeah, I'm Mike Romano with NTCA, the Rural Broadband Association. We represent about 850 small rural operators around the country. A lot of them are, of course, members of the URTA in your state, working with Kira and Douglas and others. But we have about 850 of those companies all over the country who are doing terrific broadband in rural areas and looking to expand into other unserved markets as well. We've been heavily involved in the discussions and the debates leading up to the Infrastructure Act, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law that Lisa talked about quite a bit. I know Lisa very well, and you've got a great resource there zooming into your meeting. I'm going to fly through some materials talking a little bit about how to get and keep rural communities connected, really focused on three pieces. And let me see if I can get to the next slide here. So the really three things I think are key to getting and keeping rural communities connected. The first is looking to proven performance. If you're going to be giving funding to someone, how do you make sure that there's somebody who can do what they say they're going to do and having some experience in doing that before? Proven platforms, making sure that you're relying upon something or funding something that's reliable, that's been shown to do it in rural areas previously. You know, rural is different. We've heard time and again here today, the challenges of distance and density that are faced in rural markets. And then sustainability. This is often an overlooked piece, and it's something I really want to come back to at the end because it's so critical. I mean, we're putting all of this effort and all of this time and money into rural broadband. As we'll talk about, we're not building these networks just for the sake of building networks. We're building them because ultimately there are consumers and communities who need these networks, need the services that are delivered over them to survive and thrive. So I'll come back to each of those three pieces here in a moment. But where do you start on this? So we looked at this and looked at the BEAD program that Lisa talked about. It's a huge opportunity. It's a once in a generation investment in broadband, unlike any other. You know, I think Lisa said it just right when she said that, you know, want to try to get the best kinds of networks, which we likewise think are fiber, as far out as we can. That's not to say they're going to work everywhere, but with this much money available, we should be doing everything we can, making every effort to get the best possible broadband as far as we can out there, and then solving for sort of the margins and the corner cases, rather than sort of selling ourselves short and surrendering too soon to decide that we can't do it all, and so therefore we should aim lower. So I think the law actually tees this up very well when it talks about scalable networks and talks about prioritizing funding to certain kinds of areas first and getting the best possible broadband in the areas that need it most. So we worked with the Fiber Broadband Association on what we call the Broadband Infrastructure Playbook, and that's what we've got up here for you all. And I'm going to drop into the chat after I speak here a link to that on the Fiber Broadband Association's website. But the goal of this was to talk and give states a tool as they're approaching the BEAD program to think about how do I do this? It could even be used in the ARPA context too, but it was really thought of first and foremost as a sort of preview of how to tackle all the issues presented in BEAD. So the Broadband Infrastructure Playbook recognizes that states are in different stages of development and evolution when it comes to their broadband planning and policy. Some of them have longstanding broadband offices and have run, I think Iowa's run 7 rounds of grant programs. Minnesota's had a border-to-border grant program for ages. Other states are just starting or have never done a grant program or don't even have a broadband office and are just forming that. So most are somewhere in between, of course, but the playbook is really designed in a modular way to help people get through that. And in particular, we were looking at the BEAD program and thinking about what are the issues that offices, states have to work through, stakeholders have to work through as they get ready to apply for and then receive and distribute this funding. So, Lisa touched upon some of these in her discussion, but there are statutory prescriptions on priorities, scalability, as I mentioned. The law specifies that there should be a priority in funding for scalable networks. And so what does that mean? Well, NTIA is going to have the final word on what that does mean, and they're considering that now for a notice that will be released in mid-May. But it would appear to mean that you've got a network that's going to be capable of keeping pace with demand. Oftentimes what we've seen in past programs, particularly at the federal level, is a short-term aim. Let's get everybody connected right now without thinking about where that network's going to be in 5, 10, 15 years. That's not all federal programs, but that has been the flaw within some of them. And so the law really tried to address that by teeing up this notion that you should prioritize scalable networks. There are also going to be prescriptions on policies. So you're going to have, as it was discussed earlier, a low-cost option. You're going to have interconnection open access type requirements. There's a multitude of timelines and planning cycles built within this. That's why we built this playbook modularly to help people reference it by looking at where am I in the different letters of intent, action plan, initial and final proposal stages. All of these things that states are going to have to work through and stakeholders are going to have to help states work through to get the grant program up and running. Again, many states have done grant programs before, but this is going to be different than any others because the federal funding that's going to be coming in is going to be different than, say, was available under ARPA. There are going to be more specific directives in the law and from NTIA interpreting the law about how to implement this program. So it's going to be different. And that's why the advanced planning is so important. There are a number of questions outstanding. You've got how you're going to weight and score these things. How are you going to, for example, place a priority on scalability? How are you going to measure whether somebody's doing a sufficient or adequate low-cost option? All of these things are going to go into the weighting and scoring. That is going to be critical to determining what kinds of providers, what kinds of platforms are going to be ultimately recipients of funding. And again, there may be other obligations that attach to this as well. So the playbook we put together aims to give states a running start. It aims to basically looks at 4 stages of the process: the office formation and best practices from people who've run broadband programs before and set up offices before. If you've already done that, then you can turn to the chapter or the module that talks about submitting your BEAD application to NTIA. What are some of the things that you ought to be contemplating as you look at submitting a BEAD application to NTIA, your proposals, your action plans, and the like? If you feel like you got your handle on that, or if you're already thinking ahead a little bit, you can start to think about what's your grant program design going to look like. What have you done before, or what have other states done before? And we provide a number of best practices from different states to look at to see how you might want to adapt your program or set up your program in the first instance, depending on what you're doing specifically with BEAD, in order to get those funds again to the best possible platforms, the best possible providers for your communities of need. And then finally, we looked at grant program administration because obviously the back end of this is going to be very important as well. How are you going to make sure that the dollars that were delivered are spent in the right places, are spent on the right things, and that providers ultimately are delivering the services? Again, this is not just about networks for network's sake. It's about making sure that we've got the services that are going to be delivered to consumers. So anyway, a lot of this still is to follow. We'll see when NTIA releases its notice of funding opportunity, and we will be doing updates to the playbook as NTIA does so. I want to touch upon these 3 key aspects real quickly of planning. Proven performance being the first. Vetting of providers is going to be so important. In some prior programs like the FCC's Rural Digital Opportunity Fund, for example, we saw that inadequate vetting of providers prior to deciding they should be the recipient of funds, or after had been decided they should be the recipient of funds, but prior to distribution, didn't really work very well because now you see a number of these RDOF applications held up. So vetting of providers upfront is going to be really important, and the law sort of contemplates this. But looking to local presence, local knowledge, experience in these markets in both building networks and delivering services is going to be key. So too is looking to proven platforms. And we've had a little bit of discussion about this even here today. You know, fiber obviously has a proven track record of delivering high quality performance. Our members are doing fiber in some very deeply rural areas like Alaska, Utah, Montana, South Dakota. But vetting of these platforms is going to be key. Again, if you're going to be looking to alternatives potentially to reach some places, let's make sure they can do what they say they're going to do. Let's make sure that there's lines of sight. Let's make sure that the spectrum that's being used is capable of doing it. Let's make sure the networks are being placed in the right places to deliver the speeds promised. This is not an emerging technologies fund. This is a program aimed ultimately at delivering services to consumers, not funding technologies or networks. And so again, I think looking to that through that prism, hopefully will help us make sure we're vetting the platforms and providers to get them to the right, to get the funds to the right places. The last aspect I want to focus on is sustainability, because this is so important. You know, everybody's excited about deployment, rightly so. We want to reach the unserved and the underserved, but sustainability is going to be important too. You know, there's been a tendency in the past in a lot of grant programs to fly mission accomplished banners once a network's built. Shovels in the ground, ribbon cutting ceremony, that's terrific. That's an important prerequisite to getting good broadband out there. But you want to make sure it's not just getting rural communities connected, but keeping them connected. So sustainability, the job isn't done when the network is done. The goal here is for networks to be around for to serve consumers and keep pace with their demands, back to scalability, for years, decades to come. So this is where universal service continues to be an important concept. This idea that we want to make sure that rural consumers, low-income consumers, every American, no matter what challenge they face, has an equal opportunity to have access to the best possible services at affordable rates. And you know, there are a lot of issues in federal policy over the last 10 years, again, the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund being perhaps the most noteworthy, where, you know, it's still a question mark about whether we're doing this quite right. And the BEAD program presents a great opportunity to potentially address this going forward, and I think correct for a lot of that. So I know that we've got limited time here. I do want to make sure I post into the chat here the Playbook link. So I'm going to put that up there for everybody to get to. And I don't know if we've got any time for any questions given the time that you have, but you know, I just appreciate the opportunity to zoom in and listen in on the presentations that are happening, and be happy to answer any questions.
Well, thanks, Mike. Are there any questions? I think we could take a minute. Jeff, you give up a minute or two for questions. I do have, Mike, I have some of your playbooks. They came.
Oh, great.
So those that are here, I have probably about 10, 12, I think. So if you'd like to have one in hand, hard copy, instead of online. So thank you for sending those too. This is very helpful. It's really, I think the message that you're sharing is important. It's important for us all to hear, because it's all of us working together when we working on this funding and helping it get not only, especially to the rural communities, but also, you know, across the state, wherever the needs are. We're not doing this alone, and we will get to a little bit more of that at towards the end of our meeting when we hear from our one of our senators, state senators. Okay, if there are no questions, then Jeff, we'll have you come forward. And we don't have Jared here today. He's fell ill and wasn't able to attend. And
So I noticed Ron was on there. I don't know if you saw Brock on there, so I just, I
okay,
think someone from
Brock,
memory was going to jump in as well.
I think Brock was going to, but I didn't see him earlier. So he's here. And then we, following them, we have Belina Sosi with the NTUA Navajo Tribe Utility Authority, giving their update in the San Juan County.
And are you able to switch my slides for me? Or do I
Yeah,
need to-
which one are we starting off with?
We'll start off with mine. I'll introduce, and then let Brock or Rod. Rod, are you there? Is it going to be you or Brock that's covering the Emory portion?
Jeff, I can cover it. This is Brock. I doubt there'll be any questions after you're done, but I can jump in where needed.
Okay, I'll provide some context, and then really what we're going to talk about today, we'll focus on improvements down on San Juan County. And so if you want to bring up just the first slides, there we go. So a number of you have probably heard some of this presentation before because it's been long in coming through E-rate modernization. This is one of the projects that UETN was able to pursue and fund through USAC to build out fiber optic infrastructure down in south of Monument or south of Blanding, Utah. So before this project started, no fiber optic infrastructure at all serving Bluff, Montezuma Creek, Monument Valley, Navajo Mountain, not serving those schools, not serving healthcare. And so we're successful in this application to fund this project. We broke it down into 2 sections through a competitive bid process. Emory Telecom had won both of those bids. And if you jump to the next slide, we're really fortunate, I think, kind of a reason for celebration that we have stage 1 done. Emory was able to complete that, and the benefits of that you'll show on the next slide. In fact, not only San Juan County School District schools, we've got Montezuma Creek Elementary, we have Whitehorse High School, we have Bluff Elementary, but we also connected U Mountain U Tribes Library and Education Center at White Mesa. We connected the San Juan County Library in Montezuma Creek, and then UNHS, Utah Navajo Health System. Their largest presence is right there, a huge complex within Montezuma Creek. You can go to the next slide. Within Montezuma Creek, right after we're able to connect, the schools and libraries came right in on the hills and connected that. And until that time, UETN, we had been servicing our own licensed microwave to connect education in that area. UNHS really doing the same to connect those, and with modern healthcare, the imaging, all of the things that go into that. This is a huge win to finally bring fiber into those facilities. And if you're ever in Montezuma Creek, state-of-the-art facilities that UNHS runs down there, a great facility. And so we're excited to see that happen. And then to add these libraries, because when we get in some of these areas where there's not a lot of broadband, the libraries turn out to be that place folks can go and get access. It's that resort where they know they can jump on. What we really want to kind of start focusing now is what are the challenges? What's going on within the stage 2? And stage 2 is a much bigger project. You can go on to the next slide. Stage 2 really includes extending fiber from Bluff, Utah, through Mexican Hat, down to Monument Valley, and then around to Navajo Mountain. Brock may have a slide of this. I did not put a map in this one. I should have. But when you start seeing the geographic challenges of building this out, they're real. And when we went after this project, we knew there's going to be some challenges. There's unique challenges to permitting within tribal lands. You wrap around that now, a pandemic, reducing access to some of the resources that you need to do the permitting. It just adds more to the complexity that it takes to really be able to complete the permitting to get this done. So Brock will really be able to talk to the great progress that Emory Telecom has made. They are down about finishing up work from Bluff down to Mexican Hat, which is basically at the San Juan River. South of the San Juan River is the Navajo Nation, and that's where a lot of the focus right now is on permitting those sections and getting that work done, so the build can start. We can focus on getting down to Monument Valley. And I will say, and I think Brock will say as well, a huge partner in this and helping make some of this go from stage 1 to stage 2 is Lynn Yoakum and UDOT. UDOT's been instrumental and always at the table as the providers are working to get down into these areas. And Brock, with that, I don't know if you have some slides, but we can cut to you, and then I'd be glad to answer, fill in anything as well. But we can cut to you on kind of how you see stage 2 progressing. I know you're seeing progress. There we go.
Can you see that slide, Jeff?
Yep, we see it. It's up. Yeah.
Okay. I appreciate Jeff and the whole UETN crew, and also, like Jeff said, Lynn Yoakum and UDOT. UDOT has been able to break through the barriers of a lot of the permitting process. And so we appreciate that. And then we also appreciate both tribes, both the Navajo tribe and then the White Mountain Ute tribe. That without all of the parties, nothing would be getting done. But as Jeff said, I'll just, if we go to, I'm just going to skip right to this and make this quick, but this was phase one that Jeff talked about. We built from Blanding up here through White Mesa, that's through the Ute tribe there, came down to Bluff, and then went up into the Navajo Nation at Montezuma Creek. And most of the facilities that Jeff was talking about were up in, he listed those that we are serving there on the Navajo Nation. I just want to point out these projects are pretty important in that they become anchor institutions for future builds. So as Jeff said, we've had a lot of different groups attached to the fiber there in Montezuma Creek. But in Bluff, we were able, since the fiber was there, we actually did a full fiber to the home project, and the town of Bluff is completely fiber to the home now. And so that's not just the school there, we connected everybody. And then we also are building to the cell phone towers around and helping increase the speeds of the cellular networks there too. And then one other benefit up in Montezuma Creek, and I know NTUA Wireless is going to speak to this, but the fact that we had fiber there, then we could partner with NTUA Wireless so that they could get a circuit up into Montezuma Creek and Aneth, and we're working with them to get the fiber backhaul so that then they can do the project that'll actually reach out to the Navajo residential areas there. And as far as White Mesa, we connected the school there and the library, and then we also dropped a circuit to the main tribal headquarters there. And we're working with the tribe. We actually have some funding to build out the town of White Mesa. We're still working with the tribe to see if they're going to allow us to do that or not. If not, we'll just be a support to them as they build out their own networks. So this phase is completely done, Blanding down to Bluff and then to Montezuma Creek. There's one little side note to what Jeff was saying. There's a phase two to this that goes from Mexican Hat down to Monument Valley and then around to Navajo Mountain. We had originally submitted with UETN to build from Bluff all the way down, and that was rejected by the FCC. The application was rejected. So Emory Telecom, to kind of defray some of the costs of that project, we applied through a USDA grant to build this 25 miles in the middle down to Mexican Hat. And so that's what Jeff was talking about. That's almost done. We're within 2 or 3 miles of just a few bad sections that we've got to do on that 25 miles. And then we'll have the Mexican Hat project done. Again, that's a USDA project, but it filled in that 25 miles in the middle to allow UETN to apply from Mexican Hat down and around to Navajo Mountain. And the fact that the 25 miles was out of that project, it got funded the second time. So this is the Mexican Hat project. We're going to do a full fiber to the home project there, and then also in the town of Halchita on the Navajo Nation. And then the second phase of that is to go, and this kind of shows a little bit of how, so you've got to build from Mexican Hat clear down to Monument Valley, then dip clear down around Cayenne into Arizona and back around Shanto back up to Navajo Mountain. So it's about a 110-mile build. So this is a big project. It's funded. We're just waiting for the permitting, as Jeff said. It's actually been broken into 2 permits. The first one's to Monument Valley. That one's really close. We're hoping that we have the permit to start building that. And most of this is worked through the Navajo Nation and UDOT. They've been great to work with, and they think we might have that permit here in the next month and a half, 2 months. And that'd be really good, because if we did, we could try to get that high school turned up before August. We think we can build this pretty quick down to Monument Valley if we can actually get the permits. And then the second one around to Navajo Mountain, that's going to take a little bit more permitting. There's a lot more historic and cultural sites there. And so we're trying to clear those and working with the tribe to get those cleared up. So that's kind of the project. We appreciate all the partners that are working on it. It's a big project, and it's once we're already talking with NTUA and NTUA Wireless. Once this route's in place, we're talking with them about connecting with them in Montezuma Creek and Aneth, like I talked about, but also in Mexican Hat and Halchita, and then also down in Monument Valley. And then we're trying to do a joint project to get the fiber around to Navajo Mountain. And so it'll even help the NTUA and NTUA Wireless. So we're trying to use this project as the main backbone fiber, and as that, and then that hopefully will result in better wireless and also landline or fiber service. So it's going well. The only thing I'll mention is that the project has a deadline of June 30th. So UETN is in the process of filing for an extension with the FCC, and we're hoping that is granted. If not, that would endanger particularly the Monument Valley to the Navajo Mountain section, because I'm not sure we can have that built by June or even started with the way the permitting looks like. So Jeff, I'll turn it back to you. That's all I had. I just appreciate everybody's work on it, and we're excited to see a lot of the project being built.
Thanks, Brock. And I kind of want to put a finer point on that. When we were looking at E-rate modernization, we saw a real opportunity here. This was a project that otherwise we couldn't fund. But while we're successful in funding the project and working with Emory, the time constraints, the time allowed to do this didn't change at all. And so, yeah, the need to do extensions is real. The section coming down, the very first section coming out of Blanding and through White Mesa, I think took close to 20 months, 24 months to get all that done, because there's unique permitting requirements within those communities. The pandemic really reduced access to people that needed to participate in those discussions and provide permissions and that. And so these are, as some have described, the high in the treetops type of projects. They're time consuming. The construction goes relatively fast once Emory gets started, but the permitting process is complex, and we'll work to ensure we get an extension on this, and then just keep pushing forward, because the benefits are real down in these communities, and we're excited to see this move forward. So with that, any questions on the projects? Or I didn't really provide any other updates on what UETN's doing, so if I can answer anything, I'd be glad to.
It's good. That was good.
Brock, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now we'll follow up with Valina. Valina, are you here?
Yes, Rebecca, I'm here.
Okay, we'll turn the time to you now. I'm sure this is interesting. It's been 4 years almost that I've been here at the Broadband Center, and this is we're still updating San Juan County, and I know their efforts have been ongoing and remarkable, but it's so wonderful to hear how Emory and NTUA, which please tell us all what that stands for, are working together. Valina.
Yeah, that would be the Navajo Tribal Utility Authority.
Thanks.
And we're part of the wireless, NTUA Wireless. Okay, having difficulty sharing my screen here.
You have her slides. You do actually.
Clicking on the share button, but it won't allow me to share.
I have your slides if you'd like me to do that.
If you wanted to start speaking, and Layla will pull them up.
Sure. All right, so my name is Valina Sosi. I'm the General Manager for Choice NTUA Wireless. I also have Chris Curley. He is the Solutions Architect Manager. I also have him on the call, as well as Cheryl Vitui, who is our Site Analyst and Project Manager. So 10 minutes, I'm going to go through the first few slides pretty quickly here, and I'll turn over the presentation once we get to Montezuma Creek. I'll move it over to Chris Curley. Again, thank you, Rebecca, for allowing us the time to present to the group here, as well as the advisory council. We've done significant work in the San Juan County area, particularly on the Navajo Nation. If you could go to the next slide. Just a quick rundown on some of the projects we've done during CARES. As everyone else has probably experienced, the pandemic has forced everyone to deliver services overnight, with everyone going home, working from home, doing school from home. As part of the CARES Act dollars, we were afforded some dollars to deploy 85 sites with CBRS or EBS equipment. Initially, our project listing was 104, but because of time constraints, we weren't able to complete the other projects below that red line. Anything above that red line, we've completed. Next slide. So this is CARES coverage map. Anything in red, we deployed EBS spectrum and equipment there. CBRS, we have access to in New Mexico. The Navajo Nation was afforded the temporary access to EBS during the pandemic for the 3 states, Utah, Arizona, and New Mexico. NTUA Wireless was given the temporary access for Utah and Arizona. In New Mexico, it is Sacred Winds, and that's why we deployed CBRS equipment in New Mexico. We are currently going through the agreement process with NNTRC's, the Navajo Nation Telecommunications Regulatory Commission. We're finalizing that EBS agreement to permanently allow us access and direct access for Arizona and Utah. All right, next slide. Again, as part of CARES, we also deployed 41 hotspots, Wi-Fi hotspot access for students and teachers who could not get services at their home or could not afford it. We were able to deploy these Wi-Fi hotspots at 41 locations, chapter houses, schools, our district offices. They're still up and running today. And you can see Anna sitting there highlighted in red. I also see Mexican Water, which I did not highlight. It's also there. Next slide. This graph just shows some of the fundings that we've applied for and anticipate. In the green, those are the fundings that we've won. So the New Mexico State grant, Community Connect grant, CARES defunded, and Utah broadband grant. We're in the process of finalizing agreements or receiving funding. Ones we've submitted proposals for are NTIA, Arpa, the ACA, and the USDA, just waiting to hear back, and we are anticipating the infrastructure bill. Next slide. And I'm going to turn this over to Chris Curley. Yes.
Good afternoon, everybody. Again, my name is Christopher Curley, and I'll just be speaking to our fiber to the home deployment out at Montezuma Creek. And to add to Emery's comments, yes, we are partnering with them to purchase some internet services from them. And what this will feed our head-end equipment here in the Montezuma Creek area. We've selected the AgTran Access 5000, and we'll be deploying an XG-PON network for residential and small business customers. Our design will target 82 homes in the Montezuma Creek area and 14 small businesses that we've identified. And we did go out and visit some of these small businesses and communicated to them that their quality of internet should improve if and when we do deploy this network. So again, going to the slides, last mile network will connect to Emory Telecom's middle mile network, and the build out will be completed within 18 months of the final contract being executed. Our data plans range from 50 megabits up to 1 gigabit, and we'll be adding, well, the 50 megabit is mainly for the affordability for some of these residents in this area, and we'll be scaling up to 1 gigabit as needed for business needs. Project total cost is about $417,000, and we'll be adding some contingency to that for supply chain issues and shortages in the labor market. What we'll also be conducting in our final engineering steps is any make ready that needs to take place in the area, and we'll be working with NTUA on those make ready costs. We'll be also providing a 25% match of our own dollars to the project. This would also, I guess, convey that, our commitment to serving this area long-term, and we are a sustainable company. NTUA Choice Wireless is not planning on going away or going out of business and serving these Navajo residents out in Montezuma Creek. To add further to Emery's comment earlier, we'll be working with them to try to achieve fiber to the home connectivity in Aneth, which is about, give or take, 8 to 10 miles east of Montezuma Creek. And we'll be, working with them to see what their infrastructure looks like to that area. And then we'll be planning further endeavors with them. Again, our base head-end equipment is the AdTran Total Access 5000. So we are able to scale beyond this immediate residential area, which we plan to do. And we'll be funding those costs out of our own pocket to make sure that, equity is also provided in these areas. So anybody within a give or take 20-kilometer area would be able to receive, up to 1 gigabit of internet speeds. That concludes my portion.
Thank you, Chris. Next slide. East Bus is part of the USDA connectivity grant. I know this is a little bit outside of the San Juan region as well as Utah, but it's significant to our project because with this bill, with these dollars, it will allow us to build 30 miles of fiber from Kadiahe and then all the way out into East Bus. We'll deliver 10 gigs of services to the new tower, which is 180 feet. We'll deliver EBS and 600 megahertz to the site. We're also going to set up a computer lab in the chapter house for public use for 2 years and perhaps longer than that. But this is significant because it'll allow fiber to get into East Bus, which is very close to Utah, and it'll allow for an opportunity to close that gap so that we could, for redundancy, create a fiber ring. So that's very significant for the state of Utah as well. Next slide. This is just a rundown of the CARES funded, which is part of ARPA. If you remember at the beginning of the slide or the presentation, we had the chart that showed the red line. Above the red line we completed. These are projects that were below the red line that we did not complete. I just highlighted in red there the Utah areas, Utah communities that we plan on finishing. Again, this is with the Department of Justice with the Navajo Nation. Finalizing the agreement for funding. Once we receive, we will deploy the equipment for these sites. Next slide. NTIA, once again, just like everyone else, waiting to hear back. We're a bit optimistic about this one. We have some projects that are listed there for Utah as well. We expect to hear back in mid-May on NTIA. Next slide. ARPA, initially the Navajo Nation had $208 million aside for broadband services and $100 million that was going to go to NTUA and NTUA Wireless. Far right, you can see the breakdown of the 100 million NTUA Wireless with 84 projects and NTUA with 103. Some things have changed since then. You've seen the red at the bottom. The ARPA legislation that we submitted or the president has submitted had a number of amendments. So currently the legislation as it stands today is that the chapters and the delegates, there's 24 delegates. There will be a equal distribution of 41 million per delegate, and they will distribute that to their chapters at their discretion. So chapters will be developing their own project listing and selecting their own vendor, to my understanding. So that's the current legislation, but we're anticipating that a lot of those projects will come back to NTUA Wireless to complete. Next slide. The Emergency Connectivity Fund, we went through phase 1 and 2. We have an opportunity window for phase 3, April 28th through 13th. As part of phase 2, we were able to work with the Aneth Community School to get some of the students connected using these dollars. So we're still in the process of working and deploying some of those equipment. Right, next slide. Navajo Nation Consortium phase 1. We're pretty much completing up this list, these projects. Unfortunately, none of the Utah chapter houses were included in phase 1 of this project. That's not, that's a selection list that was created by the Navajo Nation. So we lobbied a little bit more in phase 2, and we have phase 2. We have Navajo Mountain Chapter House for connectivity. All right, next slide. Lisa talked about the EBB and ACP. You can see since we started, we've had a number of customers added to our customer subscribers count. We had a number of current customers, about half. This is a 50-50. About half of our current customers transitioned over to ACP. And then we also had about half of our customers who are brand new. You can see on the right, subscribers by state, 71% of our customers who are on ACP are with Arizona, 24% with New Mexico, and 5% with Utah. About 25% to 30% of our customer base for broadband are on ACP. Next slide. Another one, another update for CAF2 compliance. As you can see, Utah State at the bottom there, we have an obligation to get to 40% customer base by the end of the year. As you can see, Utah State, we're well over that number at 55%. We're going to continue to turn up individuals regardless of that percentage. We want to get as many customers in the state of Utah. As you can see, we still have some work to do in New Mexico, but with CARES defunded deployment and the NTIA, we have the ability to get to 40% by the end of the year and exceed that. Next slide. Market planning, our strategy going forward. We want to use fixed wireless as a tool for reach. Customers who are further from the tower, we want to deploy fixed wireless for those services for those customers. We also want or have a plan to build out fiber to the home for capacity residents who are in highly dense populated communities. So people who are in Chinle, Tuba City, Kayenta, highly populated complexes. We want to be able to deploy fiber to the home. We're also actively working with the 4 major mobile network operators to expand their native coverage on the nation, so customers are no longer roaming while they're here on the Navajo Nation. We also continue to work with the local, county, and the state government on any plannings, any funding sources that are available. We're always meeting with individuals or groups to help expand broadband services to their communities. We also have opened our 7th store, which is in the Crown Point area. The Eastern Agency, we're expanding there. So the Crown Point market and the store we opened that last month. Next slide. I also just want to share that the Nokia documentary, as a result of the CARES defunded and what we did throughout the pandemic, we had the opportunity to showcase NTUA wireless, but we did not want to limit that documentary to just what we did. There were a number of individuals, key individuals on the Navajo Nation within the schools, in small communities that helped develop plans and implement them and roll them out. So help students and teachers and people who are working from home, with broadband services. You can see the list of individuals who are part of that documentary, and below is a link. It's about a 3-minute video, which is pretty cool. Very proud of it. NTUA Wireless and NTUA continue to make lives better for the Navajo people and the citizens on the Navajo Nation. So next slide. And that's all I have. I hope that was 10 minutes.
Well, I think you filled the 10 minutes and more and answered hopefully all of our questions. If we have any, maybe we can put them in the chat or we can share them later. Thank you so much, Valina, for joining us. This is
Thank you.
so valuable. We are so happy to have you as a partner in Utah and helping to get this to the homes and the tribal lands in Utah.
Thank you, Rebecca. We look forward to working with you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll turn the time now to Jesse Harris. He's with cybersecurity and a broadband advocate.
Yes. Go ahead and present here. we go. Yeah, so my background is cybersecurity. I've been in cybersecurity for about 11 years, background in tech going back to 99. Passion for tech going back to the early 80s. Got a great picture of myself at 5 years old sitting in front of a Commodore 64 in preschool. So it's been something where it's been, just kind of a passion for me. I got involved in broadband advocacy in about 2006. I was at my home in White City, if you know where that is, in the middle of Sandy, and was very unhappy with my options and started, trying to figure out what I could do to make things work. And, it just kind of sucked me in. And here I am many years later. So I'm going to be talking about some broadband mapping quality issues to think about. And the mapping's very important because it's used in three broad areas: public policy, business research, and home purchasing. For public policy, it's really important to know where it is now. Some others have mentioned the BEAD program that's coming up. There are some requirements in there in order to classify areas. For instance, an area where 80% of locations lack access to reliable 25 down, 3 up service, they're considered unserved. And areas that lack, where 80% lack reliable access to 100 down, 20 up are considered underserved. And so we need to know what's in an area to know if we can classify it as unserved or underserved. If the coverage is stated incorrectly, an area might be marked as served and it actually has a great need, or an area might be marked as completely served, and it's actually a little bit underserved. It could use a little bit of help. Another goal of BEAD is to make sure that anchor institutions like schools, libraries, and hospitals have gig service. So being able to map, do they have it there? That's another important policy tool. So the mapping is pretty critical for that. I know I've talked to a number of city leaders who they jump on the state broadband map and they say, oh, well, everything looks fine here. And I'm like, well, let me point out where it's not fine. And I show my house and it's like, well, there's providers here that don't show up on the map. And now let me show you this area out in the Escalante Desert in the middle of nowhere that says it has gig fiber, and we all know it does not. So those are some impacts you can have there. Businesses are going to be using this map to determine where they want to locate. There's probably not a business around that doesn't have at least some dependency on having a good broadband connection. I live down in Cedar City. There's a couple of manufacturing companies there. Cyberjet is one. They are doing aircraft manufacturing. They are sending huge CAD files back and forth. They need that kind of broadband. You don't think of those kinds of applications. You think of tech companies obviously need it, but what about manufacturing or healthcare, or even we have a large insurance provider headquartered in Cedar City, Levitt. They make extensive use of broadband for connecting a dozen offices around the city. And we also see an issue with home buying. The information from the National Association of Realtors is that lacking quality broadband may decrease the value of a home by over $5,000, which is a pretty huge hit. And 72% of buyers in their surveys will walk away from a house if it doesn't have adequate broadband. So that can give you an idea of why you may see, really inexpensive houses out in rural communities that no one's moving into. Maybe no one can get online there, and maybe that's why it's going to stay on the market forever. Especially, when the pandemic hit, everyone's working from home, everyone's doing school from home. It became even more important to have it in homes. So those are some of the critical areas to think about. So there are some deficiencies right now with the data quality. There's, everyone's heard the Reagan saying, trust but verify. Right now, we don't have any sort of auditing capability on the data that's submitted in there. It's all voluntary submissions. So we're hoping that the data turned into the map is accurate. And there's a number of reasons why it may not be. And the number one is that GIS is hard. Talk to anybody who's ever done it. Geolocating where things are is extremely difficult. And so there may be a number of honest mistakes in there. When it comes to estimating wireless coverage, that's a challenge too. You don't know how the terrain's affecting it unless you're going out there driving all over the dirt roads in the middle of nowhere, seeing, does the service actually work here or not? I've done a lot of that driving around. I can tell you exactly where every provider in Iron County works and does not work. So, there's a lot of honest mistakes there. At the same time, there can be a little bit of juking the stats. Sometimes it's a little embarrassing to admit, all right, our coverage is not as great as we'd like it to be. Maybe it's overstated a little bit. Maybe it's understated in some areas where a company might want to see some investments. Whatever the reasons may be, you want to make sure that the data is accurate. And right now, there's not any pricing data, but some of the efforts that Rebecca's working on to collect pricing data are going to help here. If you see on the map, hey, there's a dozen providers offering gig service at this address, you might think, great, but what if every single one of them is charging $1,500 a month and wants 10 grand to install it? Do you practically have 12 gigabit providers? Not to most people. Most people are not going to shell out that kind of money for it. So there are a few different things that can be done to fix the quality of the data in there. One of them is mandatory reporting. This is something that the FCC already requires under Form 477. So it's not really much of a burden to say, hey, when you send that to the FCC, let us know too. That way you're making sure that everybody is contributing data to the map. And so that you have a true vision of who's available and where. One of the most important points that I talked about before is having an independent audit of the data or an independent collection. I know that there have been some firms where they've loaded up a van with all sorts of signal equipment, loaded up all the cell providers in there. They just drive up and down all the highways, seeing what's out here, what service are we getting there. It's a great way to go out and map that, or going to individual addresses and saying, hey, we want to measure your broadband and make sure it is what it is here. There've been a number of stories. One just came out recently of someone bought a house after they had talked to an ISP who said, yes, we can serve this house. Moves in there, the ISP says, oh, wait, no, we can't. It's $19,000 to get hooked up. Well, now you've sunk $500,000 into buying a house that you can't get out of, and you can't get internet unless you're throwing a new car worth of money at it. And that kind of inaccuracy is something that you really want to avoid, because you can end up with not just bad policy decisions, but bad individual decisions. People get sucked into houses, just assuming, hey, I'm in the middle of a city, I'm fine. And they come to find out, actually, I'm not fine. And part of that auditing just needs to be, there has to be some sort of stick involved. Carrots are good, but there has to be some sort of penalty for reporting the bad data. Obviously you want to assume the best in people, assume it's an honest mistake. But if you see someone who is reporting bad data on a consistent basis, you'll say, hey, we need to work with you to correct this. And if you don't, you're lying to us on a form. So that's really a good overview. I know we're all behind on time, so I don't want to take up too much more. Just want to say thanks for having me here. If there's any questions, I'm happy to field them.
Thanks, Jesse. So I guess he said everything I felt like I could have, right? So thanks. So speaking of that, we do have our mapping updates. They're due this week. So we've been getting a lot of those in and appreciate that. And if you have any providers out there that are not on the map or it's not up to date, let's get that done. So speaking of mapping, we're now going to turn, if I'm correct, to their speed test. We've got Glenn Fishbein and Paul Demi with Geo Partners. They joined us last time. Now they're going to give us an update of how things are going with the Utah Speed Test campaign, and then also Katie Williams with Horrocks. I'll let them. Glenn?
Okay, so what I'm showing you, so this is the software developed and maintained by Breaking Point Solutions and marketed through Geo Partners. And this is what we currently have operating within the state of Utah. And what I'm showing you is the state of crowdsourced testing as of February 28th of this year. And moving forward a day at a time, what we can see is that your first phase of crowdsourced testing suddenly started picking up very rapidly, and the state started filling in. We're now about 4 or 5 weeks into the process. We're anticipating that in another 4 to 6 weeks, we're going to be at what we call analytic ready level. What that basically means is that the amount of data that we have is going to be statistically valid in terms of the many types of analytics that we apply to this. Now, buried back inside this map, we also have all the FCC 477 data. We have all the CAF, all the ACAM, all the RDOF. We have UCLA speed tests, and we also have Utah's address structures. Basically, it's a pre-FCC fabric content, and we've got that for 129 million structures throughout the United States. So even though we're looking just at the speed testing results right now, all that other information is available for display. Now, going back to the previous speaker, we also collect cost information as well. in terms of people reporting how much it costs them to have the services in their area. And very typical thing that we see here, as in most other areas, the more rural you are, the higher money you pay for a lower quality service. No big surprise. But again, now we can start documenting that. So as this starts filling in, we'll start seeing areas such as these showing up where we have deficiencies in overall broadband performance and areas like this. Now, as Lisa stated earlier, this is going to basically turn into a Swiss cheese problem because there's not going to be like entire counties with deficits. There's going to be portions and small regions of counties that have deficits. And what I'm going to show you very briefly is some of the things that we're going to be anticipating and why it's very important to have ISP support on this type of project. So I'm moving into a different county that's in a more advanced state than Utah at this time. And one of the things that we start seeing here is one of the things that we capture through the process is what we call no service. No service is literally, I do not have broadband service. And you can't do that with a speed test because there's nothing to connect to in order to do the test. So collecting that type of information allows us to start looking at real deficits. And those deficits can either be areas that don't have deployments or who have digital inequity issues. So for example, this is an area that has a lot of no service reports, and here's another area with no service reports. Now, one of the reasons we love ISPs is because they're the only ones who can solve the problems. And one of the things that they can do, and we're hoping we'll be getting this information, is giving us some of their fiber routes. If they can give us fiber routing information, then we can start looking at the first of the cost dimensions called backhaul. So if we want to target this area for potential project, we know there's fiber running through that area. If there is no fiber running through this area, then we have to figure out how the middle mile is going to work, getting fiber from there to there, and figuring out what the cost structures are going to be for that, or in this case, running 3.5 miles of fiber at probably $100,000 a mile. We also do point-to-point fixed wireless solutions as an alternative for solutions like that. And then the typical thing that we want to do is, you'll see that for the whole county, we've kind of Swiss cheesed it up. We've got this hole right here and this hole right here. So when we start talking about areas, we're not talking about township lines or borders or city lines. We're talking about regions that transcend borders. And those areas that we want to basically service, we have to figure out how much these things are going to cost and whether or not these are going to be competitive from a grant perspective. Now, again, this is where the ISPs are going to be very helpful in the process because we need some basic cost information and some technology information on there. So, for example, we need the cost of fiber per mile, and that's going to vary between what part of the state we're in. Some areas are going to be relatively cheap, some are going to be inexpensive. So we need the blended cost for the areas that we're dealing with. And then given that we have choices of technologies, in this case, I'm not going to be a fixed wireless proponent or a fiber proponent. I'm going to simply say it's a hybrid, some fiber, some fixed wireless. That may meet the requirements that Lisa was pointing to earlier. And from that, then we can come up with a projected project cost of about $940,000, a 77% coverage rate covering 291 households, 49 miles of fiber. And in some of the detailed content here that you can put into your grant application, we're at $4,100 per household. We've broken down the costs. We're also looking at the competitive issues. How competitive is this area in terms of, say, opportunity zones, distressed income areas, tribal areas, rurality, density, many of the factors that NTIA and other grant programs are going to be looking at. So this type of information that we are capable of providing within the state of Utah, and hope to be doing that, hopefully in a very, very few weeks as we go forward. But what we're seeing right now is the growth of activity within the testing that we're seeing within Utah, we would consider to be very good. I hate to phrase it this way, on par with Kentucky, which is one of our most successful launches. They basically locked down everything in about 8 weeks. I think Utah is going to take about 10. And then what we'll be doing at that point in time is we'll be rerunning training exercises on how to start costing these projects, bringing ISP consulting into this, and trying to get some of the backhaul information from the fiber onto this map so that we can start showing how these little Swiss cheese projects can actually be costed, evaluated for competitiveness, and then lead into grant applications that have a reasonable chance of winning. So very simply, things are looking very well from this perspective, and we anticipate that we should be able to help minimize the number of grant applications that are lost by focusing on grant applications that are both competitive and affordable within whatever grant guidelines we're looking at, be it digital equity programs or just general deployment or upgrades. So I did that as fast as I could. Any questions?
I have a question.
Question.
Yeah, well, you said that you're close to getting a number that's statistically viable. What is that number? Like, at what point is the data statistically viable?
It depends upon the household population within an area. So, for example, if we're looking at a census block, we may have 30 households that constitute the population. We may need something in the order of 15 households in that census block. If we're looking at something, say a township of say 2,000 or 3,000 households, we may need 200, 300 samples to get that particular area into what we would call statistical significance. It is a true 95% confidence interval that we're striving for, and 2 different error ranges that we apply. If you want to talk about that offline, I'll actually show you the math.
Another question, just real quick.
Okay.
Is your data collection mainly fixed wireless or fixed broadband data speeds, or are you doing over-the-air wireless as well?
We discriminate between fixed and cellular. These are the fixed locations in Utah. These are the wireless cellular locations. So you can either combine them or separate them out.
Got it.
One of the things that we see is in lower income areas, there is a tendency to have mostly cellular and very little fixed. And that's pretty consistent throughout the country. And we're beginning to see evidence of that in some of the rural areas in Utah as well.
Thanks, Gwen. My name is Katie Williams. I'm with Horrocks Engineers. We were lucky enough to be brought on to be a part of the speed test team, and we've been handling the public outreach around the speed test campaign with Layla and Rebecca, trying to get people to take this test and to participate, because you can, from what Glenn just said, you can see the importance of this and what it would mean for our state and for expanding broadband access. So I love the map that he showed, showing how the data points collected has progressed through the campaign. We launched our campaign March 1st, and we kind of ran phase 1 that through March. And it was a statewide campaign. So we were casting a wide net, trying to get anyone and everyone of all walks of life to take the speed test campaign. Through that first month, we saw really great results, and we saw a lot of data coming in along our more populated Wasatch Front areas, which is something we anticipated and kind of frankly expected. And through that first month, we were able to reach that statistical significant number in Box Elder County, Cache County, Weber County, Davis County, Salt Lake County, and Utah County. So all along the Wasatch Front. But looking, and the really cool thing about this campaign is you have this data at your fingerprints to say, from an outreach perspective, hey, we don't have enough numbers in Juab County. We don't have enough speed tests taken in Emery County. So we could really tailor the second. Different stakeholder audiences within those rural counties, and sent outreach packages to them to kind of help them spread the word and get more people in those rural communities to take the speed test. We've reached out to rural school districts, rural news outlets, co-working innovation centers, state parks, and tribal governments. And but this is where our ask comes. We still need your help in these rural areas to expand our reach down there. Our rural telecoms and our tribal partners are that boots on the ground in those communities that can help us reach those numbers that we need to be able to fully utilize the capabilities of the speed test. Like I said, we have content put together that's just kind of copy and paste that you can use. We've got PSA content, we've got a press release, social media, so that we're willing to share with you. It's all packaged up and all you have to do is press and play. We've also provided some of our posters and handouts on the table. So if you have any areas that you'll be visiting that have, community gathering points, please take some of those and feel free to distribute those. You can reach us at Broadband Center at utah.gov or connect with me after the meeting, and we'll be happy to take your information and send you this content to help us share the word so we can get those numbers and make this a really effective outreach effort. So any questions for me? Okay. Yeah, Broadband Center at utah.gov if you want content, and we will follow up with you and send you everything in the kitchen sink.
One thing, if I can emphasize, it's very, very important to get test results from people who do not have broadband. So it's not just running speed tests, it's collecting the information from those who don't have any access to broadband. That becomes a very important data set, especially in applying for unserved applications, either through Community Connect or the NTIA program coming forward.
Yeah, really good point, Glenn. And we have a project hotline set up that it's a phone number that those people that do not have service can call and report that their lack of service, and then we will document that through the speed test software. So that phone number is on all of our printed and
435-777 test.
So easy.
So easy.
You even use the right area code.
That's a rural area, so it works, yeah. So this really is an important venture. As we know, with the funding, the federal dollars, they will be based on the FCC maps, and we're hearing more and more is that we also need the providers to submit their information. We need the data so that if there's any questions or challenges to these FCC maps, it will affect how much funding is going to come to the state. Last but not least, like saving the best for last, Senator Chris Wilson.
Are you sure? We can go to a different time. I hate to be between.
Oh, no.
Time in the afternoon of.
No.
So. Okay,
You're on. You're on.
Jack?
Yeah, pulling it up right now.
In fact, I don't have an end time. It just says dash to the end, whenever that is.
Well, I'll be brief. Quickly. I think I have about 5 slides here. It's good to be with you. Boy, a lot of great information, and looking forward to being involved with a number of your meetings in the future. Again, I'm a state senator from Cache, which is interesting to see. We've got some challenges in Cache and also Ridge County. Ridge County's got some real challenges there. So looking forward to working with Rebecca. Let me just tell you quickly, we'll just kind of go through this. Like I said, I'll try and be as brief as possible. You'll go ahead. Let's start here. The state of Utah is expected to receive as much as $400 million in federal funding. Of course, that number, boy, we've seen anywhere. We know base will be 100 million, and could go up as high as, we've seen some crazy numbers, but we don't want any false expectations. So somewhere around 400 million we're hopeful for. The funds will be provided by the Infrastructure Investment Jobs Act. They passed last fall. They've also been using the word bill, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. So they've kind of changed it. So I think probably bill will be using, everybody loves acronyms. That's the toughest thing for me being new, is trying to figure those out. But the Utah Broadband Center will be responsible for the distribution of these funds. SB 215 created the Utah Broadband Advisory Commission to work in tandem with the Utah Broadband Center. Go next slide. Details about, of course, a lot of you are aware of what the work Rebecca does. That was established prior to the 2022 legislative session. It was recently amended in 21 and 22 code. SB 214 that we just passed in the last session, some of the requirements that developed the statewide digital connectivity strategic plan, which I know we're working on, administer the broadband access grant program via the strategic plan, ensure efficiency with expenditure of funds and avoid duplication of efforts, maximize the leverage of federal funding. I think that's the thing that's most important is, you know, I don't know, we never want to be greedy, but we definitely want to make sure we get us all the funds that we need to. And you know, as we've talked about different information that Rebecca supplied, you know, there's some states that probably aren't going to be on board and maybe not going to get their fair share of funds. We want to make sure that we're ready to get our fair share of those federal funds, but account for benefits and costs to the state of current broadband infrastructure. We're working with the Utah Broadband Center Advisory Commission and give them a yearly report. Next slide. Breakdown of strategic plan is referred to as a statewide digital connectivity plan required by the federal government for distribution of the broadband funding. Will include strategies to implement broadband connectivity statewide, promote digital equity, and apply for federal infrastructure and additional funds. The Utah Broadband Commission and the Utah Broadband Center Advisory Commission will work together on the plan. Ensures the federal funds are spent in a way that considers statewide interest, not specific groups or communities. Next slide. Let me just give you a little bit about the Utah Broadband Center Advisory Commission. This is SB 214. We outline the requirements, make recommendations to the Utah Broadband Center with respect to the development of the statewide digital connectivity strategic plan, the application for and use of the broadband funds, solicit input from stakeholders. I'm a small business owner. I'm a new car dealer in Logan. So, you know, I'm not an expert in broadband. That's why we're going to look for you, many of you in this room and online, stakeholders that with input to make sure that we're doing things properly, efficiently, and effectively to maximize those federal funds. I believe very strongly in that. So, of course, we'll work with private and public entities who may help with implementation of the strategic plan, review strategic plan drafts and recommend changes. And this has a sunset of after 5 years. We're hoping by then, who knows when things will be extended, but just quickly about the Broadband Advisory Commission members. There's going to be 9 members in total, 2 members of the Utah State Senate appointed by the President of the Senate, 2 members of the Utah State House of Representatives appointed by the Speaker of the House. Let me just tell you right now, there's just been a working group. It's been myself with Senator Wayne Harper, has been just, I know he's part of this council. He's done a great job, and boy, his expertise has been very, very valuable. 2 members of the House, also myself, the 2 members of the House Representatives is Representative Karen Peterson. I think she's online. Very, very helpful. She also has been previously to being a representative, worked in the governor's office. So very, very helpful. The other member of the House of Representatives was Representative Robert Spenlove. Many of you know him. His knowledge is unbelievable. He's been very, very helpful. As we formed a working group. To be upfront with you, none of us have been officially appointed by either the state Senate president or the Speaker of the House, Speaker Wilson. So we'll see. I'm sure those will be shortly appointed. And also the Executive Director of the Governor's Office of Planning and Budget, of course, Sophia DeCaro, or her designee. 4 individuals who currently work in the public sector appointed by the governor. And we're looking for people in the statute says should have professional experience in broadband infrastructure, applying for federal grants or financing of infrastructure. And 1 member of the Senate and 1 member of the House will be designated as co-chairs. Rebecca will also be a part of that group as a non-voting member, but she will obviously be there with us. So I went over, sorry about that. That was quickly. It was something I was talking to a senator from Idaho. I know they've done similar legislation this last session. We're just trying to do what we can. Hopefully I can be helpful, or those that are on this board can kind of be a liaison between Rebecca and the legislative leadership with the Senate and the House. So it's been exciting. I've got a lot to learn. Rebecca's been great, like I said, worked with. It's interesting. I came to her broadband that she did back in our summit at Cedar City. I think that was in October. I had no idea I'd be doing this, but I just thought, hey, it sounds interesting. Lynn Yoakum also will be a big part. She's very, very helpful and with UDOT. So appreciate the opportunity. Yes.
Speaking of Lynn, she has a question for you.
Lynn does. I don't take questions. No, just go ahead. Lynn, yes.
She was wondering if you happen to know what happened to the middle mile fiber projects that were removed from HB3. Logan Canyon was one of those.
Tell Lynn that I'm still working on that. I talked with Rob White, and I will have a meeting with her and Carlos and Lisa in the next probably month or so. We're working with Rebecca. I think I know, but we're still looking into it. Yeah, tell her that I'm concerned. We're working on it. So tell Lynn that I'll be getting back with her with specifics. So concerns that we have also on the middle mile, the Arpa fund. So the capital projects is what she's talking about. So hopefully she'll we'll get back with her on that. So, oh, we got.
Just contact email for you. So your legislative.
Yeah, would be cwilson@le.utah.gov. cwilson@le.utah.gov. And again, like I said, looking really forward. Hopefully I'll get this as a permanent appointed from the Senate President. But it was great working on the legislation. We worked, Kira was great part of that also that we had, and Lynn was there, Sophia was there. We just had a great working group to get this through, and we only had a couple weeks to get it done, and it was very, very important, I think, for the state of Utah, for your industry, for my constituents, and all the people of the state of Utah. We've got one chance, and hopefully we'll do it right with Rebecca and her team. And we also set up some help, hopefully, for Rebecca, and it's obviously a tough task that she's going to be working on, and Ryan will be a big part of that also. And like I said, we're a great group, and I'm just excited to be a very, very small part of it. So thank you very much. Oh, yes.
They set up similar oversight committees because, Department of Transportation will be receiving more money from federal government. So will transit. Do these other departments have the same oversight?
Not that I know of. And I've just been asked to do the broadband commission. So, and to do this, I don't remember any other legislation. I don't know if Rebecca or Ryan has seen any others, but not aware of. But looking forward to working with UDOT. I happen to be co-chair, Senate chair of Infrastructure and General Government IGG committee. So we're working very closely with UDOT with their budget and everything. So they're awesome. It'll be great working with them. I assume they're going to be involved with the transportation money that's coming in from federal government. Great question. Sorry, I'm 0 for 3 now on questions. Does anybody want me?
We're the lucky ones to have this oversight committee. That's the way I see it.
I mean, we're honestly, we're there to help. And there's some things, Rebecca and I, we're going to be meeting probably the next 2 or 3 weeks, and hopefully some information I can take back to leadership in the Senate. Like I said, President Adams has been great. Speaker Wilson's been great. And, maybe take some things back that Lynn and UDOT on the middle mile. We are going to look into that, and we have some concerns about that.
That's nice to have a voice right there.
Yeah, so appreciate it. Thank you. So I apologize.
No, Mike,
I owe you all about 8 minutes.
I think
Sorry.
this always happens at this meeting.
Well,
It's just always so full.
I've been a chairman of committees to understand how it works. So, all righty.
And we fed these people.
Yeah.
They're good. They
Exactly.
won't
That's
line.
right.
They're done.
I don't ever get to feed anybody, so that's great. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. And again, we did the broadband grant. And I know there were a number of those that applied. We only had so much funds, but it was a good way to practice the system. I think I've gotten feedback that it was good. There may be some tweaks that we need to make. And so this would be the time to let us know. I mean, I'm aware of at least one that I would like to see changed, but if there's anything else, I think it's the process is good because it's not spending a lot of, it's targeting the priorities that were set up by our our state statute, and that's the main thing. Is there any other questions or anything to come up? Lynn? Oh, you also have to take back a whole stack of those posters and put them around your community.
Okay.
Okay.
I just want to thank these three ladies right here. Your department is amazing. To see what this Broadband Advisory Council has started off to what it is today is amazing. Really is. And I appreciate all three of you.
I call them, I talk to them still. They know that. Anything else? If not, our next meeting tentatively set for July 13. I'm telling that now, so if there's a problem with that date, because I found out there's a problem with this date too, but we have a good turnout, so I think we did okay. But that's the date we're looking at next, and we'll see everyone, but maybe not Lynn. He's got plans. So, thank you. Thank you.